On April 1st, Georgia passed a constitutional carry bill and sent it to Governor Kemp's desk. He says he looks forward to signing it. This is huge. But let's go back in time real quick, back to around November, the last time I appeared on Joe Rogan's podcast. When I was on the Joe Rogan Experience, I said that most of the country had constitutional carry. And I was wrong, but I was close. In turn, what ended up happening was Joe said he didn't think that most of the country had constitutional carry. And I said, yeah, I'm pretty sure it does. Now, for those that aren't familiar, constitutional carry means that you can open carry or conceal carry without a permit. There are usually some restrictions, like you've got to be 18 or 21, but it's like you can carry a gun around. You don't need to be trained or have a license. You don't need a permit. I would recommend getting training, but it's a right, the right to keep and bear arms. Now, on the Joe Rogan Experience, when Joe said he didn't agree with me, he said, Jamie, pull that up. And what we ended up seeing was this up top. 13 constitutional. It says there are currently 13 constitutional carry states in the U.S. and 2 states with constitution carry for residents only. I saw that and I said, 13? That doesn't sound right. But, far be it from me. I don't have the sources pulled up. But I'm actually rather frustrated by this because, well, I wasn't completely correct, but I was more correct than that. The truth is, currently, there are 24 states that have constitutional carry. You need only look over at Wikipedia to see the list of 24 states. And now with Georgia about to join that list, it's clear that about half the country, literally half the country, and the majority of its actual territory will permit constitutional carry, or I should say will recognize the right of constitutional carry. But we have more news too, because in Florida, Governor DeSantis is saying he wants to call a special legislative session. That session could actually see constitutional carry pass in Florida as well. Man, Florida, you're just doing a great job. But bravo to Georgia as well. This would mean 26 states will have constitutional carry. We can also point out that over at Wikipedia, they say U.S. jurisdictions that have constitutional carry, and you can see a list of 24 states. U.S. states that have a limited form of permitless concealed carry. Illinois says non-resident, unloaded, and fully enclosed weapon. That doesn't count. New Mexico, unloaded weapon. That doesn't count either. And Washington, outdoor recreational activities. That doesn't really count, but sure, I guess. It's safe to say that most of the country will allow you to keep and bear arms as you see fit without government intrusion. And it is the right thing to do. But the latest news is that Joe Biden wants more gun control because of tragedies. That's why I just refer to them as tragedies, because it's a tragedy when someone uses a car and hits somebody. It's a tragedy when someone attacks somebody in any way. It's a tragedy when someone uses explosives. Yet they single out guns, and they single out guns in ridiculous ways, which, ladies and gentlemen, brings me to the actual social commentary of this segment, which you may have seen from the title. We have a tweet here from David Hogg. David Hogg is a prominent anti-gun activist, or maybe that's not fair. Maybe he wouldn't identify that way, so we'll call him a gun control activist. He tweeted, "If you need a license to kill deer, why don't you need one to kill humans?" And the world collectively facepalmed, because, David, you are not allowed to kill humans, and you are allowed to kill deer. It's actually quite simple. But I thought about that. When everyone was making fun of David Hogg because he said, why don't you need a license to kill humans? It's just because you can't, under any circumstances, go out and kill humans as you would deer. However, in self-defense, why would you need a license? You don't think you will need to be defending yourself. Imagine if you needed a self-defense license. Like, someone's going to try and kill you. And so you're like, well, in the event someone does try to kill me, I should go get my self-defense license. That would make no sense. Whether it be a brick, a knife, a gun, or otherwise. If someone attacks you, you typically don't expect it. And defending yourself typically means you didn't expect something bad to happen. Now, in the event that you have a weapon, you think the possibility exists. But if you take a gun and you go into a place where you know that there will be conflict, there's a question about the legality, which typically would result in you probably facing charges or, at the very least, some kind of question. Example, Kyle Rittenhouse. Kyle Rittenhouse went to a dangerous situation with a weapon, And of course, the police would investigate. I think they went too far and for political reasons, but it's very different than if you were in your home. If you're out in the street and you have a weapon, they're going to be like, why were you out here? What were you doing? And in many cases, you will face a question of an affirmative defense, meaning you were out with a weapon. How did you find yourself in this circumstance? They might ask you. Now, of course, you could always just say, I plead the fifth, get in my face. I have a right to do this. And well, there you go. Typically, when it's in your own house, I mean, it's probably fair to say you'll face similar questions regardless. But my point is, if someone breaks into your house and it's clear someone did and you defend yourself, substantially less questions. However, the point is, you are still within your rights to carry a weapon as you see fit, even if there are potential dangers. The line becomes if you're walking up to someone that's armed with a gun who's enacting their rights, then you're going to have questions about like, hey, you know, I shouldn't say walking up. I should say in a threatening context. Like if Antifa walked with the Proud Boys and they were both armed and they were, you know, primed for a fight, you're going to have questions about who's at fault in that case. But it is challenging. I will fully admit. David Hogg. He says, why don't you need one to kill humans? Well, truth be told, you do need a license to perform abortions. That's one. That was my response. And I find it funny that people are like, this is a ridiculous statement. Nice comeback. That's so dumb. The response I got from that when I said, let me pull this up. I said, you need a license to perform abortions because, abortions literally take human life. Now, my issue with pro-life, pro-choice typically falls on whether the government can intervene in private medical decisions, because we're not talking about the same thing as an independent human being who's surviving on their own. We're talking about two people who are conjoined, and there's a difficult question there. But regardless, you do need a license. And a lot of people said, no, you don't. You just need a coat hanger in a back alley. And it's really, really funny that that's their worldview, because I'm like, yo, to David Hogg's point, you also don't need a license to kill humans. You need only a rock and a back alley, or in public, or a car, or anything. The point is, we're talking about in what context is it legal to take a human life? Well, abortions is one. David Hogg goes on to say, plenty of people will think this is dumb. Good for you. I'm not looking out for an election, and I'm entitled to my own opinion no matter how much you disagree. There's a block button. You are completely correct, good sir. There is. If you need a license to drive a car, cut your hair, or hunt, you ought to need one to buy a gun. Why? How does that make sense? Your right to own a gun with little regulation matters a lot less to me than the rights my classmates had before they were killed. No one has the right to instigate lethal force on someone else to their own discretion. You do have a right to initiate lethal force against someone if they have initiated lethal force against you, or force against you which makes you feel reasonably that you could die. Reasonably is fairly broad. Someone could be running full speed at you screaming, and you are entitled to use force against them. Not everywhere. So they like to play this game. My classmates had a right to live. Yes, but the guy who shot them did not have a right to take their lives, nor was there a license required. You just can't do it. Now, I do have a right to shoot the guy who took your classmates' lives, to stop him from doing it, because he chose to initiate illegal, lethal force on minors. He says other countries have guns as a huge part of their culture, and many own guns, but they don't have near as many shootings because they have right rules. They have the right rules. We can do the same. There's a lot of people seeing this tweet regardless of what you think of my opinions. I ask you to please make a donation, blah, blah, blah. Okay, bro. Well, here's the challenge. You say your right to own a gun. It stops right there as soon as you say it's a right. It's done. With little regulation. Sorry. That's it. It's a right. People have a right. I can complain about someone who has the right to grow their own food and be like, you know, or have pigs. And I'm like, I don't like the smell the pigs make. And it's like, well, too bad. If you don't like it, you got to move. But this is indicative of the mentality of leftists. And I do believe it's indicative of sophistry. I believe David Hogg is a sophist, however you properly pronounce it, whatever. But you get my point. Joe Biden demands new gun laws in the wake of this tragedy that occurred. The reason why I say it's sophistry is because he's not talking about any logical or principled or moral distinction. He's talking about justifying his beliefs irrespective of his own beliefs. He's just, long story short, grifting is probably the easiest way to explain it. He's saying, why don't you need a license? Joe Biden saying these things. They're just saying things they think will make them fit in with their tribe. They don't actually solve any problems and thus actually make the problems worse. Why? Your right to own a gun, blah, 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 blah. The reality is, if you believe people have rights then you have to respect those rights. Infringing upon those rights, well, you can't do it. You can, however, talk about limitations on certain rights. And that's more challenging because, well, my rights aren't up for a vote. But there are some limitations on whether or not, or questions on whether or not something is a right or isn't in a more nuanced context. For example, do you have a right to speak in a way that directs, incites, or calls upon people to commit crimes? That's interesting. You're not expressing a political opinion if you say, hey, you go do this, and here's how you do it. Or, hey, here's how you, do this thing and go do it. I believe there is a distinction between explaining how to do something and telling someone to do it. But if you go to someone and say, I want you to do this, go do it. Okay, maybe there should be a limit there. Or better yet, maybe there should, and fair point, maybe there shouldn't. Maybe there should be a line at, I am going to do X to you. And the reason for that is if you threaten someone with overt violence, then you have put them in reasonable fear of harm. There are interesting questions on whether or not there should be limits to any one of these rights, especially free speech. I've often said that maybe threatening someone or incitement should not be considered free speech because you're not expressing any real ideas. Several people made a good point, though. Telling someone to do something doesn't make them do it. They have to choose to do it. Threatening someone with action doesn't actually take that action, and they can respond to you. I'll put it this way. I don't necessarily think it should be illegal to threaten someone to a certain degree. I mean, this is a tough question, but hear me out. If someone has the ability to directly act upon that threat, that is to say, if you threaten someone with physical harm, I believe the legal precedent should be that person can now act upon you because you've threatened them and they can't trust that you're going to be, acting reasonably or rationally towards them. And the truth is, that's mostly true. If someone tweeted at me like, I'm going to do X to you, I'm going to harm you or whatever, and then they showed up on my property, pretty much I'd be clear legally to act upon them with my firearms, to put it mildly. Because I can say, look, this guy threatened me with death and then shut up my house, and I'm like, get out. But you'd still probably have to tell them to leave. You'd still have to probably, I think in Maryland, you got to retreat to your house. In West Virginia, they have to be on your property, and you have to tell them to leave. And if they don't, it's not always so easy. But, the question is, should someone go to jail for making a threat? This is tough. Honestly, it really is. And I'll tell you why. I don't think people should make threats. I don't think people should be allowed to go on Twitter and make threats. But as for the law's involvement, the challenge is someone could just change the context and say, well, this is a threat now. They say, telling someone, won't someone rid me of this priest is now a threat. And when you do that, you start to infringe upon free speech. And this is where we are now with the left. The left will come out and say that hate speech is violence and it's threatening. And if enough people agree that a judge just says, okay, you know what? I got to be honest. I don't think any of it, I don't think the law matters. I really do not believe the law matters. What matters is cultural enforcement, as I've often said. And that's what the real battleground is. David Hogg putting out these nonsensical tweets, I think is actually a good thing for those who like guns and gun rights because his tweets make his side look really dumb. When Joe Biden comes out, he says he wants to ban ghost guns, require background checks for all gun sales, ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, repeal gun manufacturers' immunity from liability. He's saying a bunch of nonsense things that don't mean anything, that will change nothing. Ghost guns. So you're talking about somebody who manufactures their own weapon and they don't plan on selling it. You're allowed to do that. Require background checks for all gun sales. Well, through FFLs, through any store, that is the reality. There are some areas and jurisdictions where private sales are allowed, notably in West Virginia. Why? It makes no sense for Jim Bob to drive 3 hours to meet up with, Mary Sue so that he can transfer a weapon when they both live in the mountains and are next door neighbors. However, I always recommend people go through an FFL because you don't want to take the risk or the liabilities. If you transfer a weapon to someone who isn't legally allowed to have one, say they're a felon or something like that, then that's on you. Ban assault weapons. That means nothing because there's no such thing as an assault weapon. That's a meaningless term. And high-capacity magazines, also completely meaningless. 30-round magazines are standard capacity. Literally, not exaggerating, it's actually standard capacity. When you buy any, and I'm talking about, essentially like 5.56 or 7.62, like AR-15 rifles, basically any semi-auto rifle, it's usually going to come with a magazine that can hold 30 rounds. What Joe Biden is doing, what the left is doing, is trying to change the definition by saying high capacity actually means 10 or more. That's ridiculous and nonsensical. Here's what matters. What matters is constitutional carry is winning in the United States. Take a look at this. I love showing this this progression. It's a map showing over time more and more states adopting the right to carry. Back in 1993, there was one unrestricted state, and I believe that's Vermont up there. Man, that's a Bernie Sanders state. They love their guns. Over time, shall issue came to dominate. Alaska became unrestricted, and now as we enter the late 2000s, almost every state is shall issue. There are some changes. Wisconsin gave up on their no issue because crime was skyrocketing. Constitutional carry started to emerge in the 2010s. And now, by 2022, we are on track for 26 states to have unrestricted rights to keep and bear arms. That's amazing. That includes handguns. You know what's really surprising to me is that apparently right now, Florida has restricted carrying of handguns and long guns. I didn't know that. Florida, get your act together. DeSantis, call in the special session. Give people back their, well, I should say, stop infringing on people's right to keep and bear arms. We went to Texas. I went to a gun store. Texas is great. They got constitutional carry. So they were like, you can buy any weapon you want. We'll do the NICS background check, and then you can walk out the door with it. And I was like, well, I don't want to do that because we have to drive it back. We'd have to drive the weapons back to West Virginia. So we'll just, have it shipped to our FFL. Gets delivered to our local gun store. We show up, we fill out a form. It's like $50. And then they hand them to us. And then West Virginia's open, constitutional carry. So you can walk around carrying all these weapons unrestricted. That's my understanding. Cultural enforcement is the most important thing. If Joe Biden convinces people an assault weapon is a thing, then all of a sudden people will be like, okay, well, then a thing that isn't real is real. It's a vague term that means mostly nothing. The point is, if a judge determines that having a gun is threatening someone or walking up to someone with a gun is threatening them, then they can just say it. Right now in New York, for instance, in Chicago, basically anywhere, they say you have a right to free speech. The cops will arrest you for disorderly conduct. What does that even mean? And typically they'll get away with it. You'll be out in the street and you'll be yelling about, woke stuff, or you'll be yelling about Christian stuff. And the cops can walk up to you and say, you need to leave now or else. And if you say, no, I have a right to free speech, they'll say disorderly conduct. They'll say blocking a roadway. Laws only go so far. So it's one of the biggest problems with conservatives that they often think winning the legal battle or the political battle is the right way to win. No. Cultural battles are the most important. Now, politics is downstream from culture, which is why we're now going to have all of these states allowing concealed carry. So that's a good thing. But even with concealed carry in the law, cops can still say, oh, but having the gun was threatening somebody. If you're in New York or in one of these blue states, right now, we can see in this map of constitutional carry by jurisdiction, California is all over the place. New York is all over the place. New York City, they say, is no issue in practice, and so is New Jersey. Maryland is a may issue state, but let's be real. For those that know, Maryland is also no issue, and Hawaii is no issue. Even though by the law states in New Jersey and New York, it's a may issue, meaning you can apply, and they're supposed to give you a weapon if you do. They don't have to. It's may issue. Shall issue. This is cool. You can see shall issue constitutional carry passed, but not yet in effect. And we can see, Indiana and Ohio have just signed them. That's fantastic. You can see there's also may issue, yellow, and there's shall issue, which is blue. In a shall issue state, you apply, they give you your permit. Okay, good. It's concealed carry. In Maryland, what happens is they say, what's your reason for needing the gun? And if you say it's my right, they say, bye-bye, have a nice day, and they won't give it to you. New Jersey's the worst. In New Jersey, if you're famous or rich, you'll get one. That's what I'm told. There's one way you can get them too. They say that if your job requires the transfer of a lot of money, so if you're doing massive bank transfers, they'll allow you to get a concealed carry. My understanding is that they don't allow open carry. They only allow concealed carry. I find that so weird, to be honest. But they don't, I guess their concern is if you have a gun showing, open carry, people freak out. So they want you to keep it concealed. The remarkable thing is that Illinois claims to be a shall issue state, but you cannot carry guns. I mean, there was a big court battle And now you can. In Illinois, there are signs on all the doors saying like no guns allowed in these buildings. But hey, man, the Constitution is the Constitution. It's amazing to see that the culture of constitutional rights is winning, and I believe it's winning across the board. The earlier segment I did was on Elon Musk buying a large portion of Twitter, because I think there are enough people in this country that say, I don't like it when you have power over me and you do bad things to me, so people push back. Now, Elon Musk may be an oligarch. Hopefully he does the right thing to the extent that he can do the right thing. And I think we're going to see more and more states, because take a look at this. In this map, Florida should be green. Louisiana should be green. What is going on with these states? New Mexico, Colorado, Nebraska. Is it Nebraska or is I don't know. One of those states in the middle that we often don't think about. Nevada, Washington. They should all be constitutional carry. Minnesota and Wisconsin. Come on. Michigan, they should all be constitutional carry. Pennsylvania should be constitutional carry. Virginia should be. The Carolinas should be. Georgia is coming. Mississippi is already here. Alabama is coming. But all of these states should be. They should all be. Because these are states with massive rural populations who need weapons. You got bears, you got critters, you got dangerous predators. Should have the right to keep and bear arms on that alone. But outside of hunting or any other real, like, practical issue the left can't argue on, we have a Second Amendment right. Truth be told, the entire country should be constitutional carry. But I'll leave it that way. We're winning. David, get better arguments. Your arguments actually are worse for your side. Why don't you need a license to kill humans? Bro, there is no license to kill people. There's none. Police can't even just kill people. They often get away with it when they freak out and shoot somebody. I shouldn't say get away with it, but they're often not held accountable because people are typically like, well, we expect them to go in these dangerous situations and then bad things happen. But I think police should have some more accountability. It's just hard to figure out the right way to make it work when you do have violent crime. Truth be told, culture matters so much more. If no judge in this country was willing to uphold constitutional carry, there wouldn't be one. They could lock you up and say, do something about it. And if no one was willing to stick out their neck, then you'd be locked up. There are people in many states that are unwilling to enforce certain laws because of cultural reasons. A cop could say, hey, you shouldn't have, that weapon. Turn around and go back to your state. I talked about this in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. And there are some cops that are like, well, the law is the law. Culture matters more than anything else. Constitutional carry is winning, my friends. Out of all the things happening in the culture war, that may be the biggest area of victory for the right, for the libertarians, for civil libertarians, and just people who actually believe in the right to keep and bear arms because we believe in the people. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.